can hear me all right. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for your patience for technical difficulties. I think we're ready to begin. Welcome to the space. Good afternoon to everyone. This conversation is Justice in Transition in Guatemala, human rights issues during the pandemic. This space will take place in Spanish with simultaneous interpretation into English. My name is Saraswati, and I'm the program coordinator with Nizwa. My teammates are also here to answer any questions in the chat. You can also use chat at any time. All the information we'll be sharing in the chat. We can also send it to you through email. And as you know, we like to start our events acknowledging that the majority of us are in indigenous occupied lands. And for us, it's important to honor the people who have taken care of and who continue to take care of these territories. And so if you'd like to share in the chat where you are, we'd be grateful to you. There's also a resource that my colleagues will share. Thank you very much for sharing with us, for sharing this information with us. For me, it's a sincere honor to present to you Hector Reyes, who is a lawyer who has a long trajectory of justice in transition as a first case in the municipality of San Martin, Chimaltenango. He was the primary attorney supporting the masses so that this crime was penalized in Guatemala. He also was an accompanier of victims of genocide. In 1982, he helped more than 152 persons who were victims of sexual abuse, and there was a sentencing against the military in this case. And Mr. Reyes was also part of the team that sentenced ex-officials, high functionaries of the government. And in the case of Emma Molina Tyson, sexual abuse and violence. We're so thankful that Mr. Hector Reyes is here with us, and I'll give him the mic. Thank you very much to everyone. For me, it's a great honor to be with Nizwa here. And for those who are in different territories, I've been observing that there's a diversity in different lands, in indigenous lands in the Americas. And I send a great hug to everyone. Well, to begin, I'd like to begin with a brief introduction, about 5 minutes, to talk a little bit about Guatemala, where I am currently. To talk about the community, we have to refer to what the world is living, and what we're living in is the pandemic, right? A pandemic that for Guatemala initiates the 13th of March last year, where we had the first positive case of a Guatemalan. And from that route, there were some decisions made by the government specifically to try to contain the pandemic. And we were confined. It was a confinement, for a few months, but then they had to cede to the business needs. And now there's a lot of contagion. And we consider that in December, we had traditional Christmas celebrations where everyone went out, and Guatemala wasn't an exception. Restaurants and everything, there were a lot of people who weren't respecting social distancing and were continuing in that form. And right now we're then in March, we had vacation, and the great majority of Guatemalans took the decision of going to visit our family members, our friends. And what that does is that mobilization of people didn't respect social distancing, didn't use their masks or disinfectant gel, which is basic for our security. And because of this, now we have a high level of contagion. As I repeat, very high. There's a red alert currently on an institutional level from the hospital network. There are no beds right now for the thousands of people that have contagion, COVID and its variants. And now we're talking about variants. So to close on this topic, I want to talk about the vaccines. There's a plan for vaccines, but sadly, out of 18 million inhabitants in Guatemala, we don't know when all those people will be vaccinated. Right now, we only have 2,000 people who have received both doses. 366,000 vaccines is what we have currently. I don't know how many people are going to be able to be vaccinated. This is the first round. Hospital workers, firefighters, and it was also given to others, to some public servants took advantage of the opportunity to be given the vaccine when it wasn't their turn. There was also a very lamentable situation with some adults, with some elderly adults. When they were told that they could go get their vaccine, they had to wait in long lines. Some people were on wheelchairs, some people had help, but after those long lines that they had to wait in, they weren't able to get the vaccine. That's a reality. It's sad to tell you that right now we have 325,000 people that have COVID. So actually, it's around 13,000 people who have COVID right now. We believe that the numbers are actually larger. 7,400 people approximately have died from COVID. When people go to a hospital now, when people arrive to the hospital, a lot of times they've waited too long to get to the hospital, and so they don't have a good result. I'm talking to you a little bit about the urban area. Now you can only imagine what's happening in the rural areas where we have a lot of indigenous communities. So you can imagine places where there are no hospitals, there's no schools, there's no nurses, there's no doctors, the situation is even worse. So I think that definitely this pandemic has brought to light many things and confirmed the weakness of the Guatemalan system, of the sanitary system, and also the weakness of the government, who basically has preferred the business sector than the health of all Guatemalans who in this moment are suffering from contagion. I would continue if Sara, if you could allow me to continue with the presentation to talk about the agenda. And just to remind you, if we could speak a little slower for the interpretation.
La pantalla completa.
No está completa, ahorita está solo una parte.
Right now, it's not a full screen. Now it's a full screen.
Pues el título que se le ha colocado es Justicia en Transición.
The title is Justice in Transition and the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to talk about the repercussions as well. But also, we're dealing with a very complicated situation, and this is a reduced agenda. To talk about this, we have to say that in Guatemala, these last governments have truly taken power. Mr. Jimmy Morales took advantage of the situation in Guatemala in 2015 to become president of the Republic, a president who was young, and what he sold us was a campaign directed towards young people. Maybe we can leave the last slide. Thank you, Sara.
Esas, gracias. Y entonces, lo que hace el gobierno del
So
señor,
what the government does effectively is to say that he's a young public figure. His campaign was directed toward young people, and he came to government in a minority. His agenda has been towards the business sector, towards narco trafficking, an agenda in favor of the military. This government as well was the government of Jimmy Morales.
Guatemala, que tan buenos resultados había obtenido hasta la fecha, pero pues al momento de sentar a parte del sector empresarial en algunos casos, pues automáticamente pues no fue del beneplácito.
Automatically, he was expelled from
they eliminated CSIG. Now President Yamatei shouldn't have been the president when we take into consideration that during the presidential period and the elections. Okay, I'm going to stop and Emiliano will interpret now.
And so he enters with a minority supported by the oligarchy, by the private sector, narco traffic, private sector, and militaries. He comes to power after 3 attempts. So that's the first thing he does, is place a deceptive messaging. And we need to understand that these states of deception really comes from a law of public order from 1995. This is a law that really is counter-revolutionary. What this establishes effectively are norms, counterinsurgency norms. So in situations of state, he doesn't want more uh, situations of state, and he's had some congressional situations where his states of place haven't been accepted, and so he's using situations or states of deception. And we have many limitations. One of them is specifically there's a military control of public services. Um, Strikes aren't allowed. Public assembly isn't allowed or is highly limited. So through public force, basically, we're not allowed to assemble peacefully. And this is very lamentable that our police and our news and our media, they don't, they're instructed not to incite public unrest. So as you can tell, a state of deception like this is about limiting our ability to meet and to rally. This is what our state of affairs and our state of deception is. In January, the first declaration was made, and in one region where all the mega projects was the first place where these orders were put in place for these mega projects.
Y ante todo, pues bueno, tenemos una agenda regresiva completa en temas de derechos humanos.
So, apologies. Estado de sitio is more like military law. So there was a point, there was almost a moment where there was going to be a reform for amnesty, and this provoked a lot of backlog of cases. But our constitution archived this amnesty law, but that archival isn't permanent, and the next Congress will be able to place it into debate. And we have another law which basically wants to limit for organizations like CALDH be able to accompany legal cases. And there's a family law which is part of this initiative of laws which responds to the situation, to the ultra right-wing situation in Guatemala. And this, along with a Congress which very sadly in 2015, we weren't able to change the makeup of our Congress. And with this new legislative period, we thought that our situations would change, that there would be a stronger opposition against executive decisions. But unfortunately, we're learning that it's not that way. There's a pact of corrupt politicians in which we have an ad hoc Congress that allows any type of situation. So the Congress authorized to the presidency millions of quetzales during the beginning of the pandemic, and Guatemalans asked, where is this money coming from? Because this money doesn't exist anywhere. There were some situations, very specific situations of social situations which sadly never arrived to the communities. And in that way, there was never a real human support. to the people, to the different territories, because those monies were distributed to other places, to a few social organizations like CALDH, which have accompaniment in some, which provide some services in some regions and was able to provide some support. But basically, the government didn't provide any assistance. And so we ask again, where is that money? So we have a Congress which is tied to the interests of the business sector, of organized crime, and they've created basically a corrupt agreement. And it's what they weren't able to do in the last Congress, they'll achieve in the next Congress. We're living through a regressive agenda, and human rights are in jeopardy. And the Commission of Human Rights has requested also that the public prosecutor or the Guatemalan Human Rights Ombudsman make some declarations. The final institution that's still working is the Guatemalan Human Rights Ombudsman, and they want to silence him as well. One of the situations which has created, which the current government has created, were the institutions of peace. CEPAS, COPRED, CEPREM, Secretary of Peace, Presidential Coordinating Commission of the Executive Politic and Human Rights Matters, Specialized Anti-Corruption Unit. The government created these institutions through decree, and also created the Presidential Coordinating Commission of the Executive Politic and Human Rights Matters. COPADE is specifically created. Its functioning is very slow. It hasn't even met as an organization that's supposed to accompany, support victims. It has a secret agenda. We don't know what its functions or goals are. It could be the organization that would need to be present in the high crimes court, but it isn't there, it isn't present. And so we can imagine the great risk that we have of all the sentences in the high crimes court can't be followed up with. This had already been collaborated by with COPREDE because it was Institution for Peace, which more or less was supporting processes in the high crimes court. It had some situations of corruption with that court, but now with this COPREDE, we don't have any follow-up, and we are waiting that the COPREDE will clarify what its role is. But right now we are without any defenses. We're completely vulnerable in enforcing any of the sentences created by the Human Rights Court. So the state of Guatemala is is in contempt of court, and it's been in contempt of court for a while now. And there was a backlog in the sentencing being omitted by the court. Sara, excuse me. Let's move on to the next slide.
Perdón, volverle a recordar que hable un poquito más despacio para las intérpretes.
Muy
Muchas
bien.
gracias.
Sí, claro. Pues bueno, platicaríamos un poquito
So let's talk a little bit about
sobre el sistema de justicia, ¿verdad?
the justice system.
Hay una elección, el sistema
There
de justicia,
is
hay una
an
elección
election
ahorita,
for the justice system, for magisters of court, and
pues
the
esta
appeals
elección
court.
aún está pendiente.
And this
Hay
election is
algunas
pending.
resoluciones
There will
al
be some resolutions for this election.
no se puede, o el Congreso de la República
The,
no
the
puede
Congress cannot or
para
does
elegir
not want
magistrados.
to meet to select the magistrates of the court. So it's been over a year that we've been with the same magistrates from the previous legislative period.
No podemos mantenernos de esa manera.
But we can't continue this way.
Vamos a estar hasta que el Congreso
Definitively, we will be this way until Congress meets to address this situation. And of course, part of the justice system during the pandemic what was benefiting all those corrupt functionaries of the system who have been involved in the previous government and in the current one, which are and the CC, the court against impunity was trying to address these issues, and people from the oligarchy were denounced for some crimes. And during the pandemic, military folks and through house arrest, people were sentenced through house arrest, and several hearings were organized for several cases which we attended. With the insecurity that we felt going to tribunals because of the risk of contagiousness. But in some of the cases, the judges didn't authorize house arrests because they were asking for it of because of the pandemic, but some are in the military hospital and others are in one of the jails, which are VIP jails in reality. So that means that they have privileges, and having those privileges, having doctors who could take care of them, in that way, the judges weren't authorizing house arrests, which were used by ex-militaries. Not in that way, because we also attended leaders, we accompanied leaders and other activists who are in detention, and the judges that work those cases didn't even allow them a hearing to consider a house arrest. And in several cases, it wasn't, in various cases, it wasn't allowed, but ex-militaries did receive hearings to review their prison sentencing.
And well, also inside the justice system, this is a very new topic, which effectively it's the new composition of a constitutional court. To let you know a little bit more, the constitutional court is the largest court system in Guatemala. That's where all cases arrive. The legal system in Guatemala is designed so that the last resources are these courts. And these cases, and because of this, all kinds of cases arrive here. Ex-military cases, justice and transition cases, also any type of legal paperwork, cases related to criminalization, cases related to mega projects like extractive projects. This court composition in the past was a combination of the Constitutional Court, and it was a very good composition where all these topics were resolved. Nevertheless, now it's been co-opted. This Constitutional Court has been co-opted. We'll talk about every one of the profiles of the new candidates, but to be a magistrate, a judge of this high court, it's necessary to fulfill certain requirements, like you have to be a native Guatemalan, you have to have honorable mentions, 15 years of experience. But something that's very important in these requirements, it's to be recognized, to have certain honorable mentions. And so for current judges, these requirements don't make sense for them. The University of San Carlos is the public university of Guatemala. Also a college of lawyers and notaries from the Assembly, the Congress of the Republic, and Supreme Court also elects 2 magistrates. That's the form in which candidates are selected. Through the Superior University Council, she was selected, Gloria Porras. She had a constitutional career, and she's one of the people who was selected as a magistrate. She's given many resolutions, many sentences objectively, and while respecting the Constitution of Guatemala and criteria and international standards. Gloria Porras, let me tell you, even though she was elected by the Superior University Council, this public defender right now is resolving some legal the swearing in of Gloria Porras is a removal from the democratic system in Guatemala because she had all the profile. But the Pact of Corrupt People didn't allow her to be sworn in. Her election is still pending. We'll move on to the next. Ronnie Lopez has a past. In 2017, he was the General Secretary of the Public Ministry. And as we all know, he has not done anything in cases with grave violations to human rights. FESI, the court where we have current cases, he has served more as a vigilante and hasn't done anything to bring his friends to justice or those cases. Some of these cases are closed because they consider that the person hasn't committed any crime. Roberto Molina Barreto is another person who was elected for the title. He has a lot of experience, many years of experience, but very recently, Mr. Roberto Molina Barreta had a relationship with General Rios Montt's daughter. He was a candidate to the vice presidency, where the presidential candidate wasn't able to continue because there was a constitutional limitation. Through the Supreme Court of Justice, he is currently the president because of his age. He's the first magistrate of this court who will be there until 2026. So we'll be there 5 more years. He's proposed various resolutions. One, for example, he proposed the resolution of May 20th, 2013, a resolution that tried to give the sentence for genocide. You can now relate him. He's tied with Ms. Rios as well. If Ms. Suni Rios would like to participate, she has a vote in her favor and can participate in the next elections. Let's go to the next, please. Also, for the Supreme Court of Justice position, one candidate is Walter Paulino Jimenez Tejas. This person, he's a bit strange. He was the president of the state where the first case was litigated. He was the president of that tribunal, and he condemned an ex-military to 150 years. And well, he's presented various resolutions where he's recognized the justice system, the indigenous justice system, and his interaction with the interaction with the official system. He has a good background. And in the case that it's Gloria Porras, if he could work together with Gloria on some topics, there would at least be 2 favorable votes. He could be one of the magistrates that could effectively accompany Gloria Porras on some of the resolutions that are pending. What I want you all to start to observe in this new composition about the Constitutional Court is that the great majority really voted. Gloria and Paulino Jimenez don't have the background with all the titles, etc. But for example, Dina Josefina, another judge, she does have a lot of political connections, including she was also selected by the President Jimmy Morales through the executive power, but she's also had connections with the Patriot Party and another party that no longer exists. And well, she also presented a resolution when she was a judge of one of the courts against a resolution that Jose Efraín Montt, that was sending Jose Efraín Montt to a public center, a psychiatric center. She was one of the judges from that court who voted against the fact that he would be sent to a public psychiatric center and voted for him to be sent to a private one. So she does have a history. And besides that, also during this last period that ended, she was one of the judges who always voted against all those resolutions from the High Court that took a social position. For example, against extractive projects. She was a judge who definitely was against those types of things, and now the Republic prizes her for being a judge. Next, Luis Rosales Marroquín. He was vice president of the, sorry, I didn't catch that phrase. He has many political connections with the Zuni Rios family, with the generals, General Mont's family. He was even the judge, the lawyer for Rios Montt during the genocide case of 2013. So you can imagine that if the new candidacy of Mrs. Zuni Rios actually happens, she has many votes from Ochoa, Mr. Molina Barreto, also for Mr. Rosales Marroquín, and so we're adding all those votes up, and possibly some others who could give her, some other acting judges that could give her the vote. This election is for the President of the Republic. The President of the Republic also votes specifically for friends of the government of Amate. This is Leila Lemus. She's the acting judge. She was a secretary of Mr. Yamate. Through CICIG, she also participated, or CICIG lets us know that she obstructed one of the cases. She was defended by Omar Barrios.
cuando se hizo la elección para magistrados propuestos por el Consejo Superior Universitario, compitió con Gloria Porras.
She competed against Gloria Porras previously as well, and it was a very difficult situation, as I mentioned, because there were many rounds. And Gloria Porras won. But this professional Omar Barrios also competed.
Another lawyer is Jose Luis Libar, who's currently the general procurer of the nation. So he does have a past with chemical industries, pharmaceutical companies. So all of these really show that it's very difficult. It's another vote. It's another vote against human rights, against the area of human rights. It's a vote against. And after the fact, elected by the president, Mr. Juan Jose Samoya Villatoro, who is also presiding, is also a substitute judge, but has a long history. He's an owner of an offshore company in Panama and has several legal representations of different countries. And as a substitute judge, he will vote for extractive companies against Convention 169, protecting human rights crimes committed by ex-military commanders, etc., etc. And to end, I put these two together for a simple reason. They both, the man is Nestor Mauricio Vasquez Pimentel, and the woman is a lawyer, Claudia Elizabeth Perez. They currently haven't been sworn in by the Congress because there were in this election various irregularities. And for that reason, the Congress couldn't swear them in. But definitively, they are part of this corrupt pact, and the robbery that was done of the Constitutional Court. Mr. Nestor has many political connections. As a magister of the Supreme Court of Justice, he has benefited many different politicians who request whose cases arrive to the court, and he decides not to hear their cases. And it has also been mentioned that in parallel commissions in Guatemala are product of the postulation, and the lawyer Claudia Panagua also has a lot of political connections, specifically with the state and also with oil companies. Specifically, she has an order that she's received from an oil company, and she has relationships with the national television, specifically the president or owner of the national television company has several open cases in court which haven't still been processed, and we haven't been able to capture him. So we're arriving to one of the last but most important topics, a little bit of our closing. And we're talking about what impacts are produced by this composition of this new constitutional court. Definitively, what it produces is a consolidation of the Congress's agenda. There's a regressive agenda, which we already saw with several different laws, with some decisions. For example, in the case of peace, there are several legal actions that have been presented and for shelter, for refuge, um, which should be resolved, for protection, which should be resolved by this court. But when these new judges are integrated, we can imagine that there won't be a single vote in favor of effectively uh, with this new commission of the peace. I don't think that will be achieved. And the saddest thing is the are the steps backwards we've taken in terms of uh, eviction, of dislocation, of organized crime. And it's going to be very sad what's going to happen. And also, the previous constitutional court has emitted several sentences that are very good, that are very objective in topics related to the Convention 169 and the respect that this convention should receive, specifically so that a previous consultation and informed consultation is done with the people. This is a there are some important mining licenses that have been given out that have never been consulted with the communities. And this court has emitted several sentences in that area. And for that reason, several Guatemalan mega projects have had to, in quotation marks, suspend their operations until they follow a informed consultation process with the communities that live there. And there's several sentences of that type. But with this new formation of the Constitutional Court, for certain, resolutions will be against and in favor of these mega projects. And the current presiding judge of the Constitutional Court, Chief Judge, Roberto Molina Barreto, has said clearly in his speeches, and the president also indicated that, and he indicated that it's okay, Convention 169, but we also have to take into account the objectives that these companies have in Guatemala. Let's say that these companies want to benefit the territories, want to benefit the people. So I think it'll be very difficult so that all these themes, which are many, can be resolved in Guatemala. For example, the displacement. And as I shared with you, the Guatemalan process is designed so that all cases, no, it doesn't matter which one it is, doesn't matter what the topic of the case is, have to be passed through the Constitutional Court. And for that reason, it's super important to have a court that has criteria and standards and that respects human rights. And with this court, effectively, we won't be able to achieve anything more than peaceful resistance of the people in their different communities. And us as lawyers, try to use the resources that the law gives us so that one way or another we can be we can push this court to resolve situations with human rights standards. We know that it'll be a very difficult mission, but we know that with the support of organizations of such as NISGUA and ally organizations, we know that we're not alone. We know that we have a partner, we have accompaniment, and we know that any situation that right now comes through this constitutional court that are steps backward, we are going to ask for international support, the support of friend organizations such as NISGUA and other allies and their counterparts to know to see what's happening and what is going to happen in Guatemala in terms of human rights, of criminalization, of the respect that will be given to Convention 169. I think I've gone over time a little bit. I want to thank you all and allow that we move on with the agenda for questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor
Thank
Hector,
you
por
so much, Mr. Hector,
esta,
for this detailed,
esta muestra tan detallada
this demonstration so detailed
y las
of
implicancias que
what
va a tener
the judicial
para la
body, how the
sociedad
judicial
y
body is
los derechos
composed, and
humanos.
what it will mean for social movements that we support.
En
There's a
varias
question,
preguntas.
there are several questions.
Quizá la primera que estoy viendo
Perhaps the first that I'm seeing is
¿no?
from Mari
¿Crees que con
Julenloff.
la nueva
Do you think
configuración
that with the new
de
configuration of judicial
se
powers and
podrá
political powers,
de la Corte
that they'll be able
Constitucional
to
a favor de los
rescind
indígenas y su
any
derecho a la cultura? Eh,
decisions that were made in favor of indigenous communities?
y quizá le leo
And maybe
otra pregunta
I'll
que
read
contesta
you another question and you can answer it together.
pasos siguientes importantes
And
en
what
este
are important next steps
sería bueno
for
tener
specific
presente
cases
para
which we should have in mind
las personas que nos acompañan hoy,
for those
siguientes
of us who are joining
procesos en el
today,
CALDH o qué procesos está acompañando que
and
podamos quizá
any
difundir.
cases that CALDH will be accompanying, and any information that we can share.
Ujú.
Should I respond, Sarah? Of course. The first question, excuse me, I didn't take down well what was the first question.
Hablando de
Sure.
la forma en
So
que los
would there be some way with the new
magistrados
judicial and political
de la Corte
powers to
Constitucional a
rescind
favor de los derechos de
constitutional
los
court
indígenas
decisions that were in
y su
favor
cultura?
of
Entonces
indigenous
sí sería como
communities
la
and
posibilidad
their right to be
de un
consulted?
proceso, ¿no? Por
Would
ejemplo,
so the question is, would there be
pues sí,
is there a
de
possibility of there being like a
respetar.
countermeasure? So responding to the first question, definitively, it's not that they might rescind or revert with this new commission. What they're going to do is change the criteria of the Constitutional Court in terms of human rights, of criminalization, and of Convention 169. So what I'm saying is that they're not going to annul any resolutions because in the majority of cases they're very firmly set, but definitively they will change the criteria in other cases which they need to resolve. So there's no form of jurisprudence. In some situations, yes, in some situations, no, because right now they are criteria, they're constitutional criterias that exist. So they have the door open they have the space in order to determine other resolutions, specifically in terms of grave violations of human rights, of displacements, and Convention 169. For the next question, I really thank you for that question. Right now, um, we see a case against Luis Enrique Garcia. We saw a few days ago the judge
domiciliario mucho más amplio que el que tenía.
House arrest that was much larger than the one that he had. Before, he could only be in one municipality of Coban Alvera Paz, but now it was amplified to other municipalities in Guatemala so that he can be able to realize some work. He's the owner of a farm and he cultivates some type of product, and he says that he wants to sell it to other states. And so the judge determined that he could do it. We are waiting for May so that he can discuss the accusation that was presented by the public ministry against the general, the retired general, Luis Enrique Mendoza Garcia. These hearings are gonna take place in the Republic of Guatemala in May, from the 16th to the 21st of May. So I'd be very grateful for the accompaniment and the presence that can be given through NISGUA and allies. This case is the most recent we have right now, with hearings that have to do with justice and transition. Yes, thank you very much. I don't believe there's any other question on the chat. Phil made the last question and he says thank you. I guess I would just like to leave one brief question in how you see the role that the US has had in these last weeks. We know that after one change in government, there were certain changes, but I'd like to ask what your analysis is of how many of these changes are real, or are they just relative? And there's not a true correlation between a change in politicians when it comes to social struggles. Well, definitely with the change in government, the political change in Guatemala is radical, initiating with the ambassador of the United States in Guatemala, who from the beginning went to back up the prosecutor who has the corruption cases. Right now, CICIG with Francisco Sandoval, and I believe that now that Consuelo Porras, his supervisor, instead of giving him the support, is trying to present some claims against him. I believe that justice will be served with his presence. By giving that support is very important. I believe his presence is very important. The photo that was taken with the prosecutor shows that United States is supporting the struggle against corruption in Guatemala, and this pact of corrupt politicians doesn't allow certain things to be advanced. And so FESIG, which is the Prosecutor's Office Against Impunity, where Juan Francisco Sandoval has also supported some positions that the embassy has already had on some topics related to Guatemala. So I believe that, yes, it has been a role that has changed the agenda. There's been 2 visits already specific to Guatemala on topics where human rights organizations and other organizations have been present. Even recently, many organizations were with the vice president, and where she said that in June, there was a visit to Guatemala. And so I believe that definitely the US's eyes have been turned toward Guatemala as well. And for us, Guatemalans, it's super important because our justice system can't take these corrupt politicians to the courts. Well, it's great that the United States denounces these acts as well. And these are current politicians who have been shown to have participated in some crimes, in some strong crimes, trafficking, obstruction to justice. And so I believe that in the part of the US to highlight these politicians, I think it has been satisfactory for the Guatemalan society because we're tired of the same corrupt politicians to always be around. And the connections that they have, as we've seen, there's no justice. And so we consider that this act is very important on behalf of the US government. Even now, there's some Guatemalans who are a part of the oligarchy who have been detained, are in jail in the US because of corruption, narco trafficking, and they should pay for what they've done. But the justice system of Guatemala won't reach these people ever. Thank you very much. I don't want to abuse your time or the time of the interpreters. This question is from Marcia Trick. She asks, what is the difference against justice in transition cases? How are they different from regular human rights cases? Well, what happens in the cases of human rights, there's some cases that are part of the armed conflict in Guatemala. That's why they're called justice in transition cases, because they're part of the legacy of the armed conflict, the internal armed conflict that happened for 36 years, and where the historical commission has said that more than 300,000 people died, where 45,000 people disappeared, where approximately 5,000 to 6,000 boys and girls were disappeared during this war. And so what's been done in the cases of justice in transition is that with what little has been done right now, this new composition of the Constitutional Court, all these cases are going to have resolutions in the high courts. And this has been a sign. For example, we accompanied the case of the disappearance of the minor Marco Antonio Molina Tesa. And for example, the 6,000 boys and girls, there's not so many cases that are being investigated. The only case that we have found that was taken to justice with a minor is the case of Marco Antonio Molina Tesa. If we talk about disappeared persons in Guatemala, which are about 45,000, some of the cases that have been looked into, we haven't found more than 10 or 12. And from the people who have died, well, those cases that are being worked don't reflect the quantity of people who died during the internal armed conflict. So it's to say this sample is very minimal of the justice that needs to be done. And so then the current government, for example, closes the peace institutions, PNR and COPRED. As I said, SOSO was working with COFRED, but they close it abruptly and they create another one, which I mentioned is COPADE. And the court doesn't have a specific route, there's no specific vehicle one to the other. Thank you very much, Hector, and everyone who accompanied us, the interpreters as well. Just to close this topic, I'd like to invite you to invite the House of Memory. The link has been placed in the chat already. And also watch out for the May 10th activities. It's the anniversary of the genocide. There will be many activities. And we'll close the live session here in Facebook. Thank you to all those who were watching us through Facebook. And we'll continue in the small space to speak between MISGUA members. And of course, Hector, you're invited to stay with us. And well, we'll close here. Thank you very much to everyone who's watching us on Facebook. Good night or good evening, depending on where you are.